Welcome to Overwatch. This time we're going to talk about, well, remakes, specifically Symmetra, and also look at her kit as well as a whole. But what I want to do with this video is hopefully deal with some of the shock some people will have when they inevitably pick the new, redesigned and improved Symmetra and find out that, well, she's still Symmetra at the end of the day. This might come as a shock to some that the defensive-oriented hero who has to set up in a location and slows down enemy pushes while providing a close-range threat remained a close-range hero that slows down enemy pushes. I've seen plenty of complaints by people that picked her up that find that she isn't a great choice on attack or control, and, well, yeah. Neither is Torbjorn. Never been a big fan of Roadhog on attack unless it's triple tank either, personally at least. Or a Genji on defense, for example. Okay, let's talk context. This is the first major retooling of a character we've had in Overwatch. Abilities have changed, new ultimate, all that good stuff. Easiest point of comparison is D.Va, of course, when her defense matrix from being a one-off ability to something you could sort of toggle on and off. You suddenly saw a huge spike in her power. It only needs to be off for a second to grab a Graviton Surge, for example, so keeping some much needed defense matrix in the tank becomes a huge resource that forces the enemy team to change how they play. D.Va changed in a cool way to become, well, truly tanky in the Overwatch sense, discouraging plays around her with her presence alone. She went from a niche, okay-ish aggressive tank to something pretty decent for high aggro pushes. Since the buff she's become, well, a solid pick. So is the remade Symmetra there? Not quite yet, I think. Let me start by going over what her old core issues were, and then we'll move on to some of those that might still have remained. Basically, did the remake fix Symmetra's problems? Symmetra's flaws were numerous, but the biggest was the first point, second point transition. If you had to move where you were defending, Symmetra was garbage. It took ages for her to set up again, and when she did, you had to wait for her to get her ultimate, which on later stages of maps got progressively weaker. This has been improved with more out-of-the-box utility by using the barriers, and she can set up turrets far easier now than before. It does feel much nicer as a whole. But you'll notice I didn't mention the ult there aside from just a passing comment, which remains Symmetra's core issues, in my mind at the very least. There's a clash of ideals. She has this short-range, high-damage weapon that can really tear things apart, or right-clicks that are more of a zoning tool. Symmetra's power is still pretty heavily tied up in her ultimate though. If the teleporter or shield generator isn't up, you must play conservatively until it is, carefully grabbing ultimate charge and squirreling it away before putting down the ultimate and then finally being able to join the fight. And I think that's the core issue here that isn't really resolved. Symmetra, unlike other characters, has a semi-permanent ultimate. Without it, she feels incomplete. She's so diminished that until it's up and running, you feel like you're playing half a character. Which might be a little bit of an unfair statement. Her turrets are great when used well, and she's amazing at defending a back line. She really stomps on any overly slow push-oriented team as well. What she brings now is a little bit more forward-facing utility before she gets her ultimate up. The question, though, is this. Does she perform to a point where she's worth taking over other choices? I might do a video on this separately, but this also leads very nicely into another issue, the rise of the specialist role in Overwatch. It was a pretty cunning idea of Blizzard to name a role in Heroes of the Storm as specialist, which literally just means, at least in my mind, something that doesn't focus purely on killing people. Mei is a specialist, Sombra is a specialist, Symmetra is a specialist. They all add value to your team somehow in a way that straight healing doesn't, a straight support wouldn't. Mei gives you area denial, Sombra gives you area takeover and ultimate denial, and Symmetra gives you area denial and either fast reinforcements or more hit points. The reason I'm laying this out is simple. It's trying to answer the question of where does Symmetra actually belong on your team. Standard team lineup on the ladder is 2-2-2, a well-rounded mix of damage, tank and support. Symmetra, in my mind, certainly shouldn't take away from your support role. You still want two healers. Mono healer often falls behind and is easily gankable. It's like building a treehouse on a twig. You literally lack the support needed to keep yourself up there. But mono tank and Symmetra, or mono DPS and then maybe run like a Roadhog for example, seems perfectly fine. I'd only make the case for mono support if you're running, well, stuff like Soldier and Roadhog, very self-sufficient things that can take care of themselves. I think there's a fear out there that says that because Symmetra is in the support category, she does no damage, which is goddamn laughable. Symmetra deals a chunky, reliable 120 damage per second when fully charged, and with her increased range, it isn't that hard to actually get into range and actually do that. So first things first, well, it's been a long time coming. Blizzard should have really just shoved her in the defense category. It's a pretty moot thing to me, but it does seem to confuse and alarm a lot of people. Right, we've gone over a lot of general Symmetra stuff and barely touched on the right click, but it doesn't matter because it hasn't really changed. Let's get down to specifics. The new barrier is really damn interesting. I just wish, like most people, it flew a little bit slower than it does. At the moment it moves at standard run speed, basically meaning that the enemy can run through it without much issue, and it flies forward ahead of your team. The best uses I found for it have been, well, throwing it at aggressive pushes, of course, but also throwing it at stuff like Widowmaker and Torbjorn, things that are generally very far away or that can't move very well. Symmetra remains very, very good at dealing with static targets and has only improved in doing that with the gain of this ability. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, that new shield generator ultimate. Is it overpowered? Is it underpowered? Who knows? It's a pretty spectacular ability. It basically forces the enemy team to make a big decision. Do they focus on a normal team fight, or do they try and focus on finding and killing the generator? While that's up, your team has a hysterically huge advantage. 75 regenerating hit points is enormous in standard skirmishing, although most standard wombo combos should just be able to blow through it. If you haven't seen, the generator and teleport is a bit more durable than it used to be. A lone Genji, for example, takes a good while to wear it down, so don't expect it to be easily sniped even if it is spotted. At the moment, I'd say that the shield generator is certainly a better choice than the teleporter. Not dying is simply better than reinforcing, and team wiping with a teleporter up just often leads to a hunted down and killed teleporter. Is it too strong, however, is a tough one. In isolation, yes, absolutely. In reality, I actually really want to see more. The issue with fitting Symmetra onto your team, playing conservatively with her, and then hoping that they don't just pick Winston and remove all of your turrets in a single stroke, is very much still a thing with Symmetra, which makes me question the validity of even having these constructed long-term ultimates. The only way I can see around it is, well, you start her out with an ultimate and then build around that, because without it, she's going to feel underpowered, and with that ultimate, she's going to be overpowered by the virtue of having paid the quote-unquote toll price of the underpowered state. Basically, to the kids of my generation at least, she is the Magikarp of Overwatch right now, except for instead of getting a Gyarados at the end, you run the risk of getting steamrolled on the first point because all you can do is use Splash and hope. Unfortunately, with the PTR being, well, the PTR, it's hard to say how actually effective she is, if she's worth, say, having a weaker first point if it means you have a shield generator for the second. First points are tough to defend anyway. Volskaya, for example. Why not just have a sacrifice Symmetra that rushes forward, does a ton of damage, and gets a shield generator up for a solid second point defense? At the end of the day, Symmetra is complicated. Fun, but very, very complicated in terms of balance and design, because no other hero can have a permanent ultimate uptime, in theory at least, after the initial hump. Balancing a power curve like that, I imagine, is going to be a complete nightmare. I do think that this is an improved version of Symmetra, but this is an improved version of Symmetra that does exactly the same things you did before with some of the same weaknesses. Do not expect a brand new experience when you do load into a game and pick her for the first time. Now, thank you for watching to the end. I have been Josh, as one voice amongst many, and these are my thoughts on Symmetra so far with the rework, as well as a broad scale view on some of her fundamental issues. She's just difficult to get right. Doodles.